Hi everyone. I found my internet is not stable, so I turn off my camera. Yeah, I'm glad to introduce this project about using ESG, using Audit 4.0 to improve the ESG assurance, and by using an example of satellite image technologies to assure the greenhouse gas emission, especially the methane emission. And first, we'll introduce a framework about Audit 4.0-based ESG, then I will illustrate that using satellite images. So now ESG has attracted attentions from companies, regulators, investors, and ESG reports serve as a main channel to communicate with stakeholders. However, only 51% ESG information is assured, and there's still some key challenges in the existing audit standards. For example, how to exercise professional judgment and skepticism. And here, big data and Audit 4.0 can help. Big data, we are all familiar with big data. That is kind of external data that can reduce the dependence on the company's internal data. Audit 4.0 is a concept proposed by Professor Dai and Professor Russell Haley, who are also the co-authors of this paper. Now, Audit 4.0 is piggybacked on the technologies in Industry 4.0, that every item in the physical world has a virtual representation in the mirror world. It's kind of like metaverse, that you can get the data through the technology. Then in the mirror world, you conduct analysis, monitoring, and auditing. So based on this concept, we try to extend the scope of financial to the ESG domain. First, we need to clarify the objectives for the Audit 4.0-based ESG. The first one is to verify ESG reports by numeric data and textual claim, and I will give you example later. The second one is to have the continuous assurance by creating a dashboard and propose the new ESG metrics. And this is an example from BP 2020 ESG report. You can say they disclose the greenhouse gas emission on a yearly basis. And you can see there is almost a decreasing trend here. And they also state that they adopt one advanced technology to reduce the emissions in a specific area. This is in Permian region. So it's important to monitor and assure how much they emit in this area. So based on that, we also follow the core idea of the physical world and mirror world. We got we can apply the technologies and to get the data from the physical world and perform some functions, for example, prediction, monitoring, and investigation, further get the assurance dashboard for auditors. We can also send smart alerts to stakeholders and integrate to financial and non-financial reports. And we also provide some ESG assertions based on the traditional 6 assertions. We also have 3 special ESG assertions for technology layer, data layer, function layer, and reporting layer. There's also some examples for how to use technologies for verifying one single section or cross-verifying different sections. For example, we can use satellite images to assure the damage to the natural resources, such as water pollution or deforestation, and use sensors to get the data about air quality or water quality, and use social media to get the comments identified for the companies on the environment. Then I'll show you a case study by 5 steps for the assurance. The first one is to select ESG items and the assurance. So here we focus on the greenhouse gas emissions. And there are 2 methods to report the emissions right now. The first one is accounting method, which is use a statistic way to calculate the emissions. So, this is subject to manipulation. And the other one is using continuous monitor method, which is use sensors in the internal system to monitor the real-time emissions. But this is also subject to manipulation. And you can see there's a Volkswagen scandal here. And here we focus on the methane emission, and we search the related regulations that EPA in their proposal that it required to eliminate venting of gas from oil wells. In other words, they require there's no methane emissions in the future. So we can examine the 3 ESG special assertions on methane emissions that companies do not have abnormal methane emission, and companies' methane emissions do not significantly deviate from their peer companies, and whether companies have special patterns on methane emissions. So second step is to decide on the technology. Here we use satellite imaging technology, and this technology is owned by GHG SCT company. They launched satellites into space, and they use the satellites is embedded with sensors. So the sensors can estimate the methane emissions from the satellite images, and using also machine learning algorithms. And then we obtain the relevant data from this company. It's also only a sample data for 1 month, and it's estimate the emissions from Permian region in Texas and New Mexico, and the frequency is by second. And the fourth step is to perform functions and analysis. So for the 3 assertions, the first one is abnormal methane emissions. So you can see there are blue dots and red dots. So we input the data into Tableau. So the blue dots means there's no emissions, but the red dots means there's emission. So we can, for auditors, they can directly say there's abnormal methane emissions. And for the second assertions, to compare with their peer companies. So you can visualize with their different companies together, because the satellites can estimate all the factories from the space. Like in the traditional method, you can only get your peer company emission after they disclose it. And third assertion is to say whether the company has special pattern for emissions, and you can visualize using day-to-day variation. So you can say for company 213, it has
1 minute left.
Yeah, so thank you. And they have special pattern that they may emit more at the end of the month. So auditors can pay more attention to when it comes to the end of the month. And fifth step is to report. So for external auditors, they can have all the assertion reports and generated in one dashboard. And they can click each point and to see the detailed information for each dot. And for internal auditors, they may more focus on how the performance of the technology they adopted, so they can visualize the trend of the emissions to see whether the technology is effective. And in summary, our paper is trying to show you that we can use external data and the emissions estimates from the satellite images can help to improve the ESG assurance. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.